to the RIAC Learning Series. My name is Vanessa Brewer. I'm the Regional Interagency Council Program Administrator at the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. Our presentation today is grant writing, and our speaker is Barbara Greene. Barbara is the Associate Director at the Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children. She is also the RIAC Chair at the Cumberland Valley RIAC. Barb has been involved in grant writing. I can't even talk today. It is Friday. Sorry, guys. She's been involved in grant writing and fundraising for around 30 years, and she has graciously agreed to share some of her expertise with us and some helpful tips today. So before I turn it over to her, I just wanted to share a few netiquette housekeeping items. So if you haven't muted your mics already, please do so. This workshop will be recorded, and it's going to be archived on the RIAC webpage to use as a resource and to share with others on your councils or at your agencies that couldn't make it today. You may use the chat and or Q&A box for questions if you have them, and Lee and I will be monitoring those boxes for Barb. And we've also carved out some time at the end for questions and answers as well. So Barb, before I turn it over to you, is there anything else that you can think of before we get started?
I think I would like to say, well, I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there is so much expertise in this room already. So I feel like in some ways I'm going to be preaching to the choir. And some of you all already have a lot of knowledge about grant writing. I choose to think about it as just looking at sustainability, period. And of course, a piece of that is grant writing, and we're going to talk about it. But I welcome other people's feedback and experiences so that this is not an individual's expertise, but this is us sharing our learnings together and all coming out in a better place because of that. So.
Thank you, Barb. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to get started. And Lee has made you a co-host. So do you have the ability to screen share yet?
I'm looking at that right now. Hang on. Where's my thing? Yeah, I'm also still, practicing at doing well with Zoom. So can you all see it?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, well, that's too bad. That means I did something wrong. Okay.
Hit share again. You should have a little blue button after you hit share the first time.
Okay. Share. Okay. And it looks like right here may be where I want to go. So how about now? It works?
Yes. Now just hit begin slideshow.
Okay. So
click on slideshow.
Okay, I'm trying to. I have this other thing that's interfering. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And
bam.
Perfect.
What now?
Perfect.
Oh, thank you. So, really, I want to just talk about the road to sustainability, period. And because I've been looking at sustainability for about 30 years, causes me to understand that it's far more than just writing a grant or completing an application. And then one of the other things, and if it's not in here, I just want to go ahead and throw this out. I think we get very discouraged sometimes, particularly when we're writing grants, because many grants we write do not get funded. And I think it's important for us to understand that we have to generate so many grants in order to be successful at grant writing, because the success rate of grant writing is about 30%. So keep that in mind and don't be easily defeated, because that's the normal. So let me move on. Okay, so when we're looking at grant writing, one of the most important things I think for us to think about is we really have to have a clear vision, and that vision needs to be in place, even if we're any sustainability plan, that clear vision needs to be in place before we ever put the first word to paper, or the first planning meeting for an event, or the first contact with an organization for direct donors. And I always say that, and some people feel very differently, so it's okay if you do. We can certainly have a conversation about that. But sustainability is not a one-person job. And everything that I'm speaking to you about today, from my perspective, depends on a collective. So it's a clear collective vision. Because if you don't have a collective vision, then you don't have true ownership. And again, I know you all understand that. So what I'm hoping that you're going to get maybe out of this conversation or get affirmed is that you need a funding strategy. It's not a one thing opportunity. It needs to be part of a bigger strategy that you're doing. Working with many boards over the years, it's been very difficult and sometimes painful to get the entire group really focused on sustainability and buying into a funding strategy. But if you don't have that, then you don't have true ownership. And so then many times it is only important to you whether or not a specific event or grant is successful. So people, there also, I'm hoping that you will understand, if you don't already, how to really develop a budget for a specific grant or for a program in order to seek monies. And then hopefully, if you're not already, you will feel more capable in actually writing that grant narrative to get you closer to sustainability. So something's happening here and I'm not sure what. Let me just see. Oh yeah. Nope, went back. Oh, went way back. Okay. So what does a clear vision look like? It looks like that big picture of what you're trying to do. So what does it look like? Who's in it? When I have done this mini training before, I've actually had people. So I would like for you all to think and put in the chat box, if you will. What is your vision? In one sentence, what is your vision? So if you would put that in the chat box, please. I mean, like, what does it look like? I can't tell. Are folks cooperating?
Not yet. Everyone's pretty quiet this morning.
Okay, come on, you all. Give me a vision.
Here's one: to inspire as many people as I can.
Great. That's a great vision.
Here's
So go ahead.
Oh, nonprofit for all learning of peers and to get the message out.
Okay. So what does it look like? If that's happening, what does that really look like? So go back and think about what was the original one? We'll use that as an example.
To inspire as many people as I can.
So what would inspired people look like? Who would be inspired? What would they be doing? What would be going on if that was true? So for me, I'll just use myself an example because not everybody's real type happy today. If my vision is that families would remain, the biggest percentage of families in the state of Kentucky would get to stay together. They get to live together. they'd be able to work through whatever barriers was in their way of not making them successful, and they would be successful families. Now, what that would look like was kids were home. Kids were at home with their families. Who would be there? Would be the kids, would be the parents, would be the natural supports that are involved with that family, would be friends, would be neighbors. And what would be going on? People would be, maybe they'd be doing chores at home. You know, that was always my big thing with my kids. Not that I was ever very successful at it. And, or kids would be coming over to play in the yard with my kids. So you'll notice that when I'm articulating that, I'm saying, okay, so this is what my vision is. This is what it would actually look like if it was true. These are all the players that would be involved in it. And here are the things that would be happening. So those are kind of the vision, brings vision clarity to whatever you're trying to do. And we're simplifying it because many of you have some pretty amazing programs and projects that you're doing, that you're actually trying to raise money for or sustain in your communities. And when I have conversations with people, that's the biggest thing. They're like, this is a great idea, but I'm not sure how we would sustain.
So Barb, there were some other ideas that were listed later on. As you were talking, would you like me to tell you what they are?
Please do.
Okay, so let me go back up here. So to positively impact youth and young adults to live better lives, to help others in as many positive ways as possible. One person listed, in my case, peer support. Another listed inform COVID resources. Another listed that they would all be engaged. Another idea was to assist 300 youths ages 16 to 24 to access transportation resources by linking them to tailored CARES resource. And then just to make the world a brighter place, at least in my small part of the world.
Those are awesome. So those are really good examples. We could run with any one of those examples, I think. But if you're sitting by yourself trying to do this, then you're already working at a deficit. And I know that over the years, I have seen that people actually hire someone to come in and actually write grants for their agency or their organization. And I myself have done that a time or two in my journey. And I can tell you that whether it gets funded or not, it really lacks the ownership and investment that it would have if it was really a group effort of people who are totally invested in the outcome. So once you have a clear vision developed, and here's the other thing, and people accuse me all the time, and justifiably so, of being a process person. I'm very process oriented because I believe more in process. I struggle with putting dependent on whether or not a person actually makes something happen. If you don't have a good process for things to happen, then as people move in and out, you lose that link in your chain. So assigning tasks and creating a sort of a timeline. So if you created a strategy, let's say what you needed to do was you needed, I don't know, $500,000 to sustain the work that you're doing. Okay. And you have a clear vision of what this work is. Now you've got this vision, what this work is. You have an understanding of what it would look like and who would be involved and who the beneficiaries would be of this great work that you're trying to think about. Then some tasks need to get assigned if you're doing it in a group process. Again, I will always be kind of talking about a group process. So someone needs to investigate or research different aspects. So let's say you're trying to raise $500,000. And so we look at that in different ways. So one person might investigate grants. What's out there? Who funds what? One person might invest individual donors. There's payroll deductions that can be done. There is all different kinds of sponsorships that can be done. And then another person might actually be invested in looking at how does all this fit together? So if you're doing this piece and you're doing this piece and you're doing this piece, how does all this stuff intersect? How does it connect? And then of course, create a timeline. And particularly when you're writing grants, well, almost anything, but including grants. If you have a grant, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit further along, but if you have a grant, if you need the money by next June, you have to understand how long it takes for each one of these adventures toward gaining that funding to come to fruition. Like, how long does it take to get involved in a major donor campaign? What's that timeline? What's the turnaround time for the time you write the grant and the time you actually receive the dollars? So a timeline has to be created around this funding strategy that you're doing. It's a big job. You can see why it's going to take more than one person to pull this off, right? So, and then here's the big thing. We know we need $500,000 to sustain this work. How do we know that? How do we know that? Again, it's really looking at, and over the years, I've been involved in a lot of fundraising, and people have different notions. And one of the things that I have always kind of stuck with is I have an ideal budget. Let's say part of my budget is to buy a super duper copying machine to make all of these outreach materials that I need. And all of you all do outreach of some sort. And you know what a difference it makes when you have high quality or low quality materials to work with. And so let's say I want one that can fold, staple, make pretty, mutilate, whatever these documents or this PR materials. So I'm going to be looking at a machine that costs more money. And so investigating what are those things you really want and what is the real cost of things. So you need to be thinking about that. If you're going to do this work, you have all these programs. Honestly, think really honestly, how many people does it really take to do that? How many people does it take? And how much is that going to be worth? And of course, then there are hidden costs, and you all know that. You don't just pay a person X amount of dollars. There's fringe, there's unemployment compensation, there's all of these things that have to be built into that keep building that up. So that investigation needs to be done early in the game. What kind of stuff do you need? What supplies do you need? How much equipment do you really need to do that? And really, your grant narrative is really a budget narrative. So when you're thinking about it, and you might also be thinking about utilities and rent and where it's going to happen out of, copies that you might need. Are there any program specific needs that you're going to have? And one of the big ones, especially for those of us who live in the rural area, and I think we were talking about that a little bit before we even began this morning, is, it may not cost the same for Wi-Fi. If you're looking for for Wi-Fi capacity, and you got several little hubs that people are going to be operating out of, you can't assign a universal price to that without investigating the differences in prices in the different places. Lots and lots and lots of groundwork that has to be done that I think sometimes we kind of overlook. And then we wind up getting the money, but it's not quite what we really needed to pull something off. Okay. Do not practice until you get it right. Practice until it can't go wrong. So, you know, if you need a team of people, you need a grant writing. If you're doing grants, you need a grant writing team, not an individual, to be able to do all of this. And again, we talked about research, and how much we just in these last few minutes, we talked about the different types of things. That's just the surface of the research that really needs to be done. When a grant reviewer, for example, or even a donor organization looks at your request, they're really looking about, is it really realistic? Is this realistic? Could they really do that on this dollar? Or do they have other dollars to supplement this dollar so that this is really doable? And what and a lot of the grants that I've written, that was one of the hits I took. They were like, okay, what you're saying really can't be done on the amount that you're asking. And for some of them that I had good relationships with, they've said, so you probably need to up your request. A lot of it's either, well, they don't understand what it's going to take to do it. And so I was dismissed. So just keep that in mind. And then without padding, because they're also looking for places that look padded. You need a good plan, and you have to understand, what is the process for this? Is it an application format? Because I love those simple application formats that you go through, but they're few and far between. Usually that's just the tip of the iceberg. Are you going to need to be on the ERA Commons? Are you going to, what are the hoops you have to go through just to get a grant submitted? And each one of those, you have to allow for some time for things to happen in between those things. Carol and I recently wrote a grant and it was funded, yay! But there were several times in that process that it bogged down because something wasn't working correctly. And so had we not allowed for a long time for it to get done and wind up where it needed to be, we would have missed the deadline and we would not have had the opportunity to have the grant. Here's the other thing I think that my experience, there are different types of funders. There's government funding, as you all are well aware. There's also foundation monies that support the kind of work that we do. There is, we talked about individual donors, but there's also religious organizations that we can tap into. Each one of them have a different set of criteria that you must meet in order to be considered. Back in the day, I wrote many grants around social justice because that's the world that I operated in. And I'm going to give you an example. One of the grants that I wrote was CHD. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's called Campaign for Human Development. And it was national faith-based pockets of money. And that when I got through with that grant, boy, I didn't know what I was getting into. So that's the other tip. Research what you're getting into and what all is entailed. when I got through with that, it looked like a real book, not just a little book, but a book. Um, it was very arduous. And at that time, I was not prepared or skilled enough to do that. So it was an epic fail for that particular grant. And I didn't have enough people assisting me in the process because, I'm the superstar. I know how to write and I can get this money. And it's great to have confidence, but it's better to have a process and people to help. So there's a simple sample format of how most grants roll. But each one, again, there are different idiosyncrasies of each funder that you encounter. And so let's look at so this is a sample format. It's not totally universal, but it is in some form these things. Does that make sense? It doesn't always follow the same, but these are the pieces of it. And one is an introduction. And one of the things that I've learned, and we all have our own skills and our own talents, and we all write in different ways. I have been accused of being very flowery in my writing. And while that worked for one funder, because she actually called me and she said, when I read your grant narrative, I watched women and children rolling out of the mountains into your office. And I was like, this is it. They got this. But not if that was that specific foundation that I was writing for. And they got it because they had a clear vision and an understanding of what I was trying to do. Had that gone to someone else, they may have looked at that as being, oh, that's just a lot of pretty language. And so you really need to be specific. Here's a big hint that I've learned, and that is, it may sound a little bit intimidating, but I call them folks up. I just call them before I ever even start writing. I call them and I ask them the questions. I make sure, well, can I share with you a little bit about what we're really doing and what I'm really seeking support for? And would you be willing to tell me if that truly meets your criteria? They will look at who are the decision makers. That's a big piece. Understand that. Even in the process, they want to know who your decision makers are. Who gets to make the decisions about how that money gets spent once you get it? Even though you submitted a budget and said how you're going to spend it, who's going to monitor that? And is that the group of people we want, meaning them, to be monitoring that? In some of the grants that I've written, it was around diversity. Well, they wanted to ensure that whoever was implementing that grant represented what we were trying to do in that grant. So our board of directors, I needed to prove that they were also diverse and that this was coming from a diverse perspective. So call them up, ask them the questions. And again, that may feel intimidating, but you're going to save yourself tons of time, really, if you have an initial conversation with those folks, just to make sure that it's going to be worth all the time that you're going to put into it. Because you can't, I'm a kind of a fly by the seat of your pants type gal. And I also, what do you call that? Procrastinate. So I kind of procrastinate. And so a lot of times I'm like, no, my creative juices flow at the last minute. Well, you don't want to do that with grant writing. So you have to refrain from that and get them, set yourself a shorter deadline for your creative juices to flow in order to really meet all the requirements you need. But they're wanting to know who you are, not just what your name is, but who you are. They want to know about the activities, the things that you have done in the past that were successful. What have you done in the past that was successful that makes them believe that if they gave you this money, you might be successful because you have a track record of being successful. And there's usually some sort of application, even if it's an application, there's some sort of a mini application before the application that you need to complete. And a cover letter introducing yourself and your agency. When they will allow that, that's very, very important. And let me just jump right in right quick. And I know I'm talking 100 miles an hour, so I apologize ahead of time. There's a lot to talk about. Be very careful that you're sticking to the facts. Flowery language is good. It was good for that chick to see all these women and children rolling out of the mountains and coming in and participating in this program. But without the facts, the flowers don't matter. So be very, very factual. The goals and objectives, they really, really have to be written in a way that there is a distinct connection. So we need to be careful that we do that backwards mapping about, okay, so the end result will be this. And in order for that to happen, this will have to happen. And it will happen to have to happen 6 months before that can happen. So be very clear when you're making your timelines, because what your goals and objectives are really those tasks that you've already done your big vision. So these are the action steps that you're going to take. These are the goals that you're setting in your place to ensure that the vision happens. And then these are the specific action steps that are going to take place. This is when they're going to take place. This is who's going to do them. This is how it's going to look when it fits together. They want to know all that stuff. And in your statement of need, you need to really be careful. I'm saying you guys know this, but we need to be very careful that any statistics we put can be backed up. How you write out that need makes a big difference in whether or not they'll buy it or they won't. If I say, according to the 2020 census in Appalachia, this amount of families lived in poverty, I got to cite where I got that from, because they want to know, where'd you get your information? So make sure you cite places that you get your information, that they can quickly go and say, hey, you know what? That's right. That's correct. In other areas, when we're trying to write the need, we may not have like statistics to draw from. What we may have is our experience. And so it is okay to include some of that anecdotal information in your need statement. In working with 100 families in the state of Kentucky, a survey monkey collecting data revealed that 75% of them have behavioral health issues in their family. That's okay. That's okay to do that. But if you're citing these other statistics, you cited, we have a survey monkey. That's where we got this information. So they're clear about, you got information from somewhere, and you're not just making that up as you go. And I know, you're thinking, well, who would do that? Well, lots of people would. So they have that need they have came from somewhere. So in your proposal narrative, that's kind of the core of the proposal that you're writing. And it's the goal of it is to reinforce those goals, to make that connection between those goals, to help them be able to, as much you can, vision or see how everything fits together and why that makes it work. And it's really kind of given some more meat around how you would implement the goals. And of course, it should also include some sort of a a timeline measure. And then go back. You've already been there. You started from there. Go back to that outcome. And you say, so as a result of all of these objectives that we've done, this is going to be the benefit for the folks we're doing it for, or the folks that we're doing it with. Also understand a little bit about your audience, the foundation. You need to research the foundation or the funding source. I know they put out in a book what their priorities are, but investigate. Go look at who else they funded. Go look at the types of things they like. You will begin to see some patterns emerge out of who they're already funding and at what rate they're funding them. Okay. I know I'm talking 100 miles an hour, so I'm sorry. And the more you practice writing, truly, the better you're going to get at it. Me and Carol do a lot of joint writing proposals, and she'll take one section and I'll take a section, and we'll both kind of play with that section, and then we'll come back together and we'll say, does this fit together? Does this make sense? Does it build on each other? Are the objectives there? Did we get all the facts? And so also having another person to help you critique where you're going will make a big difference in how successful you are in raising money. Okay. Be relevant. You know, you don't, I have seen this happen many times, and usually it has a disastrous end. And that is, you find out that some money is out there to do something and you need money. And so you go write a grant to get that money to do that with, but you're just going to do that on top of everything else you're doing, because that's going to help sustain the work that you're doing. Not a good strategy. It's really easy to get so obliged to dollars that the dollars aren't supporting what you're doing anymore. That you are now just doing all of these other things just to stay on top of the water, and you don't really have the time and the people dedicated to doing what was important to you in the first place, the reason you even are doing all this. So remember that. How does this funding relate to your group? There's a book out there, and you all may be aware of it, but it's called the oh my gosh, it just went out of my mind. It's a funding guide. You can Google it. It's on Google. Funding guides. You can get the state of Kentucky. You can get the United States. You can get specific to Appalachia. You can get specific to a particular topic or a cause that you're trying to create. Like there may be one for education. There's funding out there for individuals. There's funding out there for groups. There is a lot of money out there. Sometimes just figuring out what's really realistic and what makes sense to us is the hardest part. Where to go to, choosing where to go to is sometimes the hardest part of that, because we don't want to give up who we are to chase a dollar, to be who we are, because we get lost in what they want for the dollar. So just keep that in mind. The audience, who are you targeting? Let's say you're going to be doing some events. Let's say this is about fundraising events. And I'm going to say this, and I'll say it, it may come later, but I'm going to say it right now because it's very, very important. Diversified funding is key. If you're totally obligated to, and many of us, I think, find ourselves in that position because in the state of Kentucky, because we have had an awesome state structure. and they've shared our goals, they've taken direction from us, and they have been very generous to assign monies to us. But if all we have are those state monies and something should happen, then we could fold. So remember, your funding strategy needs to be diverse. So one way to do that is really to have these events. And I'm just going to use an event that KPFC does as an example of that. That's the Stone Catchers Ball. Great concept. I don't know if you all have heard about it or not, but it is a way of generating money to support the work of KPFC. But beyond that, it is a way of recognizing who are those players that we never want to forget for the contributions they've made. And the first year that we done it, we lost money doing it. And the second year that we done it, we lost some money doing it. The third year that we done it, we made a little money on it. And so if you're doing an event and it's a consistent event, don't expect that you're going to generate all this income. Build into your planning that you may not see a profit from the beginning, and then build in some measuring tools that allows you to decide when you might decide that this is not going to work for you. This event does not work. So be careful when you're doing events. Remember, you got to plan. You got to plan for when you're going to realize some profit from it, and evaluate that along the way. Or you could forever be doing something and never making profit. And if that's okay, if the other piece of that is you're invested in the other outcome of that, and that's more important than gaining money, then that's a good thing to keep. But if it's not, then we need to relook at what the event might be. So who are the audiences for us? You know, if I'm having this event in Frankfurt, quite honestly, and I'm asking people to come and pay $50 a plate, I might get that. If I try to do the same event in Whitley County, Kentucky, and I'm asking people to pay $50 a plate, I probably will not. So you got to factor in those kinds of nuances into your thinking about that. The who, the what, the when, the where, and how we're going to build on it. If I don't make any money, which we did not in the first year that we done the Stone Catchers Ball, how do I build on that event to strengthen our ability to grow as an organization? Am I making sense? Is it? I can't tell because I'm sharing, but hopefully that's making sense to you. And then, of course, finally, and I don't know where we're at on time, Vanessa, are we still okay?
We are about 15 minutes away from 11, so it's 10:45. And Barb, before I forget, we have had a question in the chat box to see if we could get either a copy of the grant template that you shared or the PowerPoint in general that we could share with everybody. Okay.
Absolutely. I will send that to Vanessa, and Vanessa can send that out to anyone who's interested in having that. So in the end, we've talked about a lot of different pieces. Here's where we really put it together. So, and this is a very, oh my God, my dog's going to start barking. This is, I'm obviously at home with a dog that's in the office with me, Bella. Anyway, so I put together a very simplistic calendar, and this is what I use. And it's like, here's the dates. And I might put into this, I don't have the ability to do it on here. I did the last time I did it, but I didn't this time. But I might put in it a due date for a grant. So if I'm going to the Yami Crawl Foundation And I know that that proposal is due on Friday, the 26th of this imaginary month, then I need to map back on this calendar when things are going to happen. I don't know, but I'm going to bet that a lot of you have started grants or fundraising and just ran out of time. And then something has happened and it fell through because something didn't happen when it was supposed to happen in order for you to be able to submit. And so it's this calendar is can be a huge asset. And it's a different way about thinking about it. I think sometimes when we think about grant writing, we think about sitting down, creating a grant, sending it off, and they should be funding it because it's good stuff. But unfortunately, our process has to match their process in order for us to be successful in obtaining the money. So, and maybe, so here's maybe some of you all would be willing to kind of share some of your own learnings that maybe haven't been included or might have a specific question or that I would try to assist you with to the best of my ability.
Barb, there are some questions in chat box if you would like me to go ahead and read them.
That would be amazing.
Okay, so one question is, where do you go to usually to locate grants that are available to apply for? And then the next question is, what is a normal timeline from start to finish?
Okay, so the first piece of that, where you would go to, I go to the internet. The name of that book that I was trying to describe to you, it's called The Grant Seeker's Guide. Now, if you purchase that book, it's fairly expensive. But you know what's really cool is you can go and Google and get pieces of it all over the place. And so you can do that at an inexpensive, for an inexpensive amount. So that's really good. Now, where that's going to take you by and large is it's going to take you to foundations. Remember to diversify government money, foundation money, church money. I mean, there's lots of different ways to look at what monies are out there. There's local money, there's regional money, there's state money, there's national money. So it's endless, just, you know, keep typing in Google all of these crazy combinations of words and it'll keep opening up opportunities for you. And then the second question was, I forget.
Oh, it was, what is a normal timeline from start to finish?
So generally what I have found is you need to give something about 9 months. So it's depending on, and that pretty much takes care of even the most sophisticated process. So if you start 9 months out, then you're probably going to meet even some of the most sophisticated processes. There's things you have to do. And for some grants, you have to obtain different things. And before I forget it, let me say, some of the most successful grants I have ever seen is where two groups have partnered. Those have been some amazing, there's been some amazing success around that. So I just wanted to put that out there before I forgot.
So Barb, another question in the chat box is, have you been successful contacting grant administrators for assistance or questions, and are they helpful?
Usually they are, sometimes they're not, and you get off the phone going, well, that was an epic fail. But normally you don't get a hold of the chair necessarily. Most places have what they call program officers, and those are the people that you generally get to have those conversations with. But you know what, if you are even only talking to the secretary, they can give you tons of information. And sometimes they're even more willing to, because they don't have that same burden of what they should or shouldn't say. So I've gotten a lot of information out of people's secretaries.
So we don't have any more questions in the chat box. Actually, we just got one more. Can we lean on you for questions in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and if you have information that I've omitted out of here that you think that I may know, please, because we're trying to do that, which brings me to a whole other thing. You know, oftentimes what happens, and this goes back to the partnering piece, we need to be in a place with each other that we don't necessarily guard our information about grants so tight for fear of competing with someone else. And one of the things that I did one time, and this is just outrageous, but one of the things that I did one time is I was looking at foundations, and there was a lot of offices. All of these places have offices. Well, we just made appointments up in New York to these offices, and you know, we raised enough local money, and the 5 of us went up there, and we were from different agencies, but 5 of us went up there and had appointments, and we said, well, this is Barbara, and she's with Mountain Women's Exchange, and this is Lucy, and she's with Save Our Cumberland Mountains, and this is so and so, and we have all written grants, and we're coming up here to support each other. And we think all of these grants are important. So we're really asking you to look at all of these efforts and possibly fund them all. They were totally blown away because we were up there in a non-competitive way. So anytime you can share with each other. So for example, I may be going after ASAP money. I just made that up, but I may be going after as soon as possible money to the soon as possible foundation money, and you may be going to the Grant Me Now foundation for money. I could support you, or if we were both going, you know, if we were sharing with each other resources, then we might decide that maybe one of us should go to Grant Me Now and one of us should go to ASAP, and we'd both stand a better chance of getting funding that way, so that we weren't setting ourselves up in as competitors for the same dollar. So they are blown away when people actually share resources instead of competing for them. But I really feel like we're more successful when we do that. So that's just another little tip based on my experience.
So another question that we've received is, would you apply for a grant that has a 2-month turnaround if you had to start a program from the beginning?
Absolutely not. Me personally, probably not. You cannot do it justice. And again, you wind up getting there's a danger actually, and winding up getting so wrapped up in that the what you write into it really doesn't support what your vision is, or you may not really even have the capacity to pull that off. So just be very, very careful. And I know some things come out and there's a quick turnaround. If it's a small piece of money, and you can make that turnaround fairly quickly, and it's inclusive of other people and their minds, and you're staying true to your own process, then that's one thing. But be careful of that.
Barb, I've got a question from you or for you. When we talk about goals and objectives, can you talk about the importance of using the SMART objective framework? I learned that from you all when I first started this role.
I can, and I think I was maybe alluding to that when we were talking about that, but SMART, specific. Be as specific as you can. Don't leave any room for misinterpretation or vagueness. Be very specific about your goal. You have to show people and know yourself how you're going to measure whether or not that goal is going to work, whether it is working. Oh my God, I just lost it. Attainable. Make sure that you can really pull that off, because it's important that you build a reputation and a track record of pulling things off. I know that I have written some grants and applications, and I kind of done that a little hasty. And in hindsight, I said, I wish I'd have never even asked for that money, because I don't know how we're going to pull that off. So make sure that it's attainable. And the last being, realistic. Attainable, realistic is the R. And then, of course, T is that you do put a time frame around it. It's a timely goal. Like if I'm writing a grant, I don't want to write the time frame for 5 years from now. It needs to be something I can accomplish in the grant period for which I am seeking this money. So timely is the T. I knew that right until you asked me that, Vanessa, and then I was just like, oh my God, I can't even, smart, okay.
No, you are fine. And thank you for addressing that. The reason that I wanted you to, I know the local grants that we provide from the department, we ask that they use that SMART goal and objective framework. So I know that you covered that in your slide. I just wanted to make sure they could connect that with what you were saying earlier, because it's so very important. Okay. We also ask our RIACs to do that on their action plans as well, as to use that SMART goal framework.
And this is a RIAC setting. And so let me just say, RIACs are, not everybody's getting paid to sit at that table, to be part of those goals and that vision. They're also very obligated to their own specific independent agency that they're working with too. And so the fact that they're willing to come to that table and then think about what they're doing on top of all of that together is pretty flipping phenomenal. And families and youth truly benefit from that. But it doesn't always feel, it's difficult on top of everything else that you're doing to now come to the table and sit and talk about this other thing that overlaps all of that stuff. So my hat's off to the agencies that keep showing up every month to these RIAC meetings when, they had to set something seriously aside in order to be at this meeting. And now they're talking about another effort and how invested they're going to need to be in that. So that takes a lot of commitment from folks.
I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but I just wanted to open it up to anybody. If you have questions and you want to unmute yourself while we've got Barb here with us.
Vanessa, this is Donnie Ray. How are you all this morning?
Hey, Donnie Ray. Doing good.
I just want to thank Barb, Carol, and their whole agency for everything they do, all the grant opportunities that they've had in the past and continue to have. One thing that I seem to have a problem with is the language of some of these grants. I have to call you or Leah to get an interpretation of, dummy it down in layman terms, kind of. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, like Barb said a minute ago, don't be afraid to call me. I'll speak for myself. If I can help you in any way with anything, I've been there to do whatever we need to get done as a LRCs in the peer group meetings and whatever. But that's the thing I wanted to say, and I'll get off here. Thank you.
Donnie was recently at the RIAC meeting for Cumberland River, and I think we picked his brain. So just that whole notion of being able to do that together can only make us stronger. So thanks again, Donnie, for the assistance you led with us. We were so impressed with some of the things he was doing that we had no clue how to do. But Donnie was so instrumental in saying, well, here's how I did it. Here's what worked. Let me tell you what didn't work. This did not work for me. So, you know, the fact that we're going together and we're saying, we don't want you to choose from us. We want you to support us all. And this, we are going to support each other, is huge.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Barb? Barb, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the chat box, but so many people have said thank you for sharing this wonderful information with us today. And for the RIACs that are on here, you know, like I said, we are going to put this on the RIAC webpage. We'll archive it on there and, you know, use it as a resource the next time that you go to apply for, you know, the funding that we provide through the department. I know right now there is that system of care partner funding request that's out there. So if you're thinking about applying for that, maybe send your RIAC members some homework and have them watch this video before you guys sit down and talk about what your vision is and what your plan is, just so you can get those things lined up. Barb, I want to thank you today for agreeing to be our first presenter in this RIAC Learning Series kickoff. I've enjoyed hearing this. I know we're going to get the PowerPoint, but I have like 3 pages of notes too. It's just such good information. So thank you. Our next RIAC Learning Series opportunity is scheduled for June the 4th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That topic is trauma-informed care with Barren River RIAC's Melanie Watts. She'll be covering that topic for us. So if no one has any other questions, comments, we'll go ahead and we'll close for the day. Thank you guys for spending your Friday morning with us. And thank you again, Barb, for sharing this wonderful information.
Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share my experience. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.